congratulations to everyone for being with me for thus long. We're at lecture number 5. So we have just gone through 4 lectures. And during those lectures, I give you a short orientation, overview of the tradition, and also we start from something I call the mind, right, mentality. So my purpose is to situate the canon actually back into community, reconnect the canon with people. The people actually use the canon, so what's in their mind. As we said, very likely, people, majority of believers, they don't care about the content, exactly how many scriptures there, but however they will care about the importance of the canon. So I will show you that. And from now on, we try to shift to some more specific, and as Venerable JT said, we're going to study some examples. But before we do that, I want to introduce technology of Canon-making. However, I want to declare here, right in the beginning, I never made a Canon, right? I never had any capacity to make a Canon. In today's talk, we're actually going to focus more on the printed Canon, right? The technology for printed Canon, because we know throughout the history of Canon-making, there are different kinds of Canon, and nowadays we have digital Canons. Of course, I'm not a person who is behind any digital projects, digitization of canons, so I cannot speak about technical things about that, but it's very interesting area to explore. So today, primarily, I'm going to put the canon back to something we call the history of the books. Right? So it's an emerging field. People try to study how bookmaking actually changed history, especially change cultural history. We know books are for reading, but making a book is a social practice. Right? It has its own chain of events which lead to a publication. As scholars, we publish books. If you publish books, you probably know it's not going to be just write a book and load it online, for example. It's not that. Right? But however, it requires a very kind of a diligent process, and we have to make lots of effort. Right? That's just for publication of one book. But here we're talking about the canon, right? So lots of them. So basically, the Tripitaka, the canon, is a collection of books. And I set a couple of objectives for this lecture. We're going to see canon as a collection of books. So some content or ideas will be based on the history of books. The second perspective is about the technical aspect. We know it is a technology involved, right? But however, exactly how the canon was made there involves technology. Right? So as I said, we're going to focus on printing. Right? So then this kind of a technology include things such as cataloging. Right? Probably today we're not going to talk about cataloging. As I already introduced catalogs in the beginning class, in the first lecture, right? So if there are questions, we can go over that, but making a catalog is absolutely a initial step and very important. It requires a lot of textual criticism, right? Examining all the texts and find out exactly what a classification of structure belongs to. Storage, right? When you made the canon, where do you put that? Papermaking, because this is about the printed canon. Printing that technology is going to be on paper. Layout and formatting, no problem about that. We need to know this because we want to use the knowledge to identify a canon. Binding, printing, right? Block carving, right? See how much we can cover. And probably we're not going to cover all of that, right? Once again, right, I'm not a person who can do any of this kind of thing, paper making, right? I can't do that. But I try to understand that because technology is very important, right? We all know how technology is important in our daily life. Right? This is the same thing for the Asian people. When printing technology was invented, I imagine it's something like the digital revolution we have right now. So a little bit words about the history of the Chinese books. We know the Chinese books are the kind of a very elaborated kind of production, and it requires different process to make it. Right? For example, the writing material, the book, when the words, characters being either handwritten or printed, right? That involves the writing material. And we know paper was invented later. Right? So the age of paper actually came rather late. Right? So Chinese had used in ancient time the bamboo slips, for example. Right? The bamboo, processed bamboo slip, which can be the writing material. Right? Silk, for example, can be also the kind of a material, but we know silk is rather expensive. Right? So then paper was invented, right, in the Han Dynasty. Then paper became dominant kind of a media, which has been used for transcribing Buddhist scriptures and printing. Right? So the kind of a media we're talking about is primarily paper, because we're concerned about printing. But paper actually, paper quality or different kind of paper are very specialized topic. Right? You need to know the process or the content, even the chemical components of the paper. So that's very scientifically kind of a specific topic. Right? In relation to this, right, Chinese books also distinguish themselves by using different kind of binding styles. Right? So then you can, in the early time, right, well, the bamboo slip, of course, people kind of link all the bamboo slips and form a scroll, right, but that's made of bamboo. And silk, you can do that same way, paper the same way. But however, later we also developed, in China, people also developed some other folding style, such as accordion folding style, very often being called the sutra binding style. And the most successful binding style later is something called strain bond, right? Strain binding, which means to use a strain to bind all the on the back of the book, then hold the paper together. Right? So here I have examples. Right? If you want to understand, right, from the real object, right, I have a scroll here, which is actually a reproduction of a frontispiece of a Buddhist canon, right, from Zhaocheng canon. Then you see this scroll, right, maybe one volume, right, has been formed by adding a wood rod here, right, as an axle, and then you scroll that, and that closes the book. You unroll that, right, unfold it, then you have this entire sheet of paper, right, with text printed on it, and also a frontispiece, right, which is a beautiful painting of Buddha preaching, right, Buddha preaching. So this is what I mean by a scroll, right. Later we can talk more about how this kind of a binding style changed the way of making Buddhist canon, right. So I want to pass this on to the audience. Maybe you can have a better look at what the canon or the binding style changed. Right? So this is scroll I just mentioned. And the second major style I'm talking about is accordion folding style. Right? By name, you know this is something like the instrument accordion. Right? It's like this, but they don't make noise or music by doing this. But I already resembles because this is particularly suitable for binding Buddhist scriptures, right? For the use of Buddhist scriptures, right? And also it is called sutra binding style, right? Sutra binding style, and scripture binding style. Right? So this is coming from, this is modern reproduction, by the way, right? And not coming from a Buddhist canon. But here you can get a sense how a book can be made by bind the book together like this, right? So this is called accordion folding style, right? So I hand out this one as well. Okay, so you can pass this to other classmates here. Right? The third one, which is most popular, is what we call the string binding, right? String binding, which means, right, here I have an example, right? A Buddhist book, right? The book, one sheet of paper, has been folded, right? And all the ends been put together. Put the cover and the back here. Then you use string, right? Of course, you have the needle, right? To cinch the kind of a back of the book, right? And hold all the pages together. Right? This is a very traditional kind of a binding style, and later has been adopted to produce Buddhist canon as well. Right? And you open the book just like any books we read in modern days. Right? So very close to the modern day books. Right? But however, the way it is printed, right, in ancient time is to use wood blocks. Right? Wood blocks printed on one sheet of paper, then fold them and form a book. Right? So this is the third one, which is a majority of Chinese books, right? Non-religious, secular books. They will be bound like this. So one set of the canon actually use this kind of binding style. So my point is that this class is about the technical aspect. So this is what I mean here. Right? So the different styles of binding, different ways of using paper, for example, all this affect canon-making. And also for Chinese books, we consider the different realms of circulation because the books are meant to be read. Right? Then their readership and their group of people, community who use the product, right? No matter what it is. It's a book of the government decree, for example, and the almanac or something else, right? So they're meant to be used, right? So we have a government consumption. Actually, government in the early age is one of the most kind of a demanding user of books or printed material, right? Because the Chinese state has been governed by issuing various kind of documents. So there's in the early time, right, the development of writing and Chinese books greatly associated with government activities, right? Using of seals. Then there's lots of such kind of interesting development within the government. Right? And also the secular use of the book. Right? So there's secular readership. Right? In the later time, the wood block printing technology has been applied and used by lots of private print shops simply because there's a secular market. Right? The market is there. The readership, the literacy has been kind of at that point, the book can be sold for a profit, right? So we have a secular market. And another area, circular, you can see the books, is religion, right? Religious communities, they need books. So the believers need books. Then you see the production of scriptures, right? So this is why printing somehow was invented in relation to reproduction of Mayan texts. Right? So the first discovered printed book, we're talking about real book, is actually a scroll of Diamond Sutra, right? Discovered in Dunhuang around the 9th century. I'm not talking about the first printed material. Actually, one discovered in Korea, right? It's supposed to be even earlier than this. But however, it's only a production of the Dharani, right? The piece of the Dharani. It's not a book. Right? But here we're talking about a book. Right? So the readership, right, can be, for Chinese books, can be educated elite, government officials, common people. Right? Here I say with functional literacy. Because to be able to read a book, you need to be educated. So then literacy is required. Right? Educated elite, of course. Right? They are educated, they are capable of reading books, but however, they are also common people. They have a limited education, especially in the late imperial China. Right? But however, their literacy somehow is functional because this is the nature of learning Chinese. If you don't use that, quickly you will forget about those Chinese characters. Right? So we have been living in the States for a long time. Our Chinese kind of deteriorating every day. Right? The ability of writing Chinese character kind of just disappear, right? Because we don't use that often. And today we have computers, right? So we just type and input those characters without writing. Right? So this kind of a literacy sooner or later will gone, and reading ability becomes a question. Right? But however, they do have access to books, and they access books through the vernacular writing, the vernacular language. So these are somehow the overview of what happened in kind of the overall Chinese literary circle about book production. Right? Let's coming back to the Buddhist canon. Right? The first kind of a technique which precedes canon making is to make catalog. Right? And making a catalog is not the end. We know Zhisheng, right, I mentioned this catalog which has the number of 5,048, right? That's a standard catalog for making a canon. But however, only have that catalog is not enough to make a canon, because you need a call number system. You need to identify each case or volume, the exact position in this entire collection. Right? So the Chinese, after some experiment, right, eventually decide to use 1,000 character essays, right, which means this essay composed of 1,000 characters without repetition. Right? But according to some scholars, actually this author made a mistake. There are only 999 characters, unique characters. There are one duplicate, right, unfortunately. So it's 999 actually. So it was composed by Zhou Xingsi, right, who is an official at the Southern Liang dynasty, right, in the 6th century. So this essay becomes so popular, then it becomes the primer for teaching young students, right, the pupils, about learning Chinese. Right. So if you want your kids to learn Chinese in ancient times, is to learn this essay of 1,000 characters, and you memorize this essay. You memorize this essay. Right. Then, so I gave some examples, right? So if you can read Chinese, the first character is called Tian, right? Second called Di, right? Then it's Xuan and Huang. Right? So you don't need to memorize all. I only give you some examples. But in ancient time, right? Everybody knows this, and they can figure out when you say "er," for example, where it is. They can tell you it's actually number 9, right? Its position in this is number 9, and the next is going to be Yue, right here. The sun and the moon, right? Sun and the moon. And for now, I at least I can remember the first is Tian, heaven. The very first case, number 1 is Tian. So whenever you see a text with a 1,000 character number, which is 10, that means number 1. Right? So number 1 always the great Prajna Paramita scripture in 600 vesicles. Right? So that's always this great collection being put in the beginning. Of course, 600 volumes will kind of occupy a couple of characters. Right? So that's the way Chinese actually figure out how to organize a canon. Right? So this is the call number system we refer to. But however, this is, as I said, this is quite archaic right now, because in the last lecture when we talked about the Taisho canon, right, the Japanese Taisho canon compilers did something remarkable by give up, right, do away with this system, because in the modern time, right, this 1,000 character essay is no longer the standard primer, right, the textbook for kids to learn Chinese. Right? The Japanese and Koreans, they don't use this. Right? They don't use this. So fewer people can memorize it. So this call number system just lost its efficiency. Right? So it got to go away. Right? But however, for us to study the addition of a copy from a Canon, we got to understand this because that got printed, printed actually on onto the Canon, onto the Canon. So binding style, so I already indicated their binding styles, right? The scroll I showed you, right? Accordion folding style, right? String stitched booklet style, right? And a butterfly style, Indian style, that's are not frequently used for the production of the Canon, right? Of course, they have been used in history, right? These are rare styles, right? So here I give you a kind of a chart here, then you can see the way it folded here, right? So just like the example, this is scroll here, right? And this is a folding style, or we call that sutra folding style, more like accordion, right? And these are the rare styles, right? Gradually they disappeared from history, and the last one is a popular binding style called the stitched string binding style. Right? So I have examples given to you. You can have a look. And the scrolls will be put together more like this. So you see the way of storage is that one after another, they have been piled up together. Right? So this is, if I remember correctly, the Korean canon. Right? The scrolls has been put like this. Right? And by the way, the scrolls can be printed. Right? Although it's the primary binding style for the manuscript, handwritten texts. But during the early printed stage, actually, like Kaibao, we're going to study later. Actually, they all, although it is printed, but however, they have been kind of put in the scroll form. Right? It's scrolls. Right? And also, what is interesting is that a scroll can be easily converted to something like a folding style, right? And also string stitched. Because I have examined some copies, for example, the Korean canon, just like this. They are all scrolls, but I went to Harvard Indian Library and examined some Korean canon. They have been folded together, and the stitched just like a book, because you can simply fold that 5 lines a page and make that a book. Right? So actually, the scroll can be converted to some other binding styles. Right? It happened in the later time, especially when you printed new copies. Right? You have the block and you print new copies and you change the folding style. That's possible. Right? And there are a couple of terminologies for printed editions. Right? First, you're probably going to see the remarks on a piece of paper which indicated 纸 or sheets of paper. Right? So this often being indicated in a particular canon. Right? Talk about how many papers actually used for making this canon. Right? Number of cases. Right? Han. Right? So this is one of the most important kind of unit of the measurement here, because the 1,000 character essay, character from those essays, will be applied to a case, right? So then you know, when you put a case together, you know it is 10, the heaven, for example, that's number 1. Right? Even if they have been misplaced, but however, you look at their character from the 1,000 character essay, then you can put them in the right order. And you can put them in the right order. And of course, right, 1,000 character, right, you have to kind of know where to find them, You can find them in the Han, also in text itself, right. The format of the print, the surface of paper, right, so that's the format. Later we're going to kind of tell more details about that, right. And the preface, right, usually what you see in the beginning of the text or the end, right, beginning is the preface, and the end is a colophon, right, you have a colophon here. Right? And also, sometimes you can see in some editions, the scribes, right, the person who actually transcribed the text onto the blocks, actually they write their name there, right? So that got preserved. Right? Also the carver, right? The person who carved the characters onto the block. Right? You have their names and the printers, binders, right? Usually you can find this information at the center of the page. Right? Later when we see the format, we can recognize their place. And also very often, just like the scroll I handed to you, there are fonte-based images sometimes being painted, right? Sometimes being painted onto the beginning of a text. Right? At the end of the scripture, you can see a dragon tablet. Right? So this often happened in the later editions, which has been printed there, but leave the blank sometimes. You can according to who paid the money, right? If somebody paid, it's right over there. This is coming from the donation of this donor, and he wants to dedicate this to something, parents or deceased relatives. Then that's the purpose for this kind of a tablet. We call the dedication tablet, right? In some other cases, we find stamps. You can also use a stamp, right? Carved and stamp onto the end of the scroll. Right? So there are a variety of technical things, right? We need to kind of memorize, recognize. So in the future, when we see a piece of copy, we can easily identify which edition it belongs to, because sometimes the canon did not come to us as a whole. It comes as just like a piece of paper, maybe fragmented, right? But however, it has some information. If we match to our knowledge, we can identify exactly where it comes from. And also paper quality, right? In the ancient time, actually, in the early time, the paper quality is quite high, right? So there are some paper made of silk, right? Made of different kind of materials, which is very strong. But later paper, what I learned is that made of bamboo or very bad kind of material, wooden material, which doesn't last longer. Right? Particularly, the bad reputation goes to a kind of a place coming from northern Fujian called Masha Edition. Right? This is a popular commercial printing center. They produce books, lots of them, but their quality is just so bad. Right? So shabby, the paper, the binding, they don't last longer. They don't last longer. But some of them, remarkably, they are endurable. Like this type of paper called golden grain paper. Right? It actually has been made during the Song Dynasty to transcribe a Buddhist canon and preserved in a place called Jinsu. Right? This is temple name. So the paper has been made in such a good quality, and lots of people steal the canon, just want to have a piece of paper of that. Right? So what they did is that they turn it over, or they cut off the blank pages and they use that for some other purpose, to write something, calligraphy or somewhere, because it's so precious. Right? The paper is so precious. They don't care about Buddhism. Right? They don't care about Buddhism. Right? And there are white sutra paper, right? Yellow paper, right? And the wood block made of a variety of different wood, right? There are pear wood, right? Jujube wood, and katapa wood, right? So these are the special kind of wood very often being used for making the wood blocks. So here I put contrast, putting in contrast two different kind of paper. This is a canon of the Dongchansi temple, which was produced in the 12th century in Fuzhou, right? And this canon is particularly important because it represents the southern tradition, right? The southern tradition. I'm talking about the three text families in the canon-making history in China. Right? So this comes from there. It's very rare, but the paper quality is remarkably good. When examining that, the paper just looks great. The ink, by the way, I didn't introduce the ink. Right? So it's also a special kind of a product. You have the ink represent the quality as well. Right? So the ink and the paper, they all appears to be very good, very hard. I believe this is the yellow hard paper. And this book is coming from later time, probably in the 17th century, And I examined this also in Library of Congress, right? Library of Congress at Washington, D.C. And this paper, I think, it cannot be compared to the paper I examined in early Southern Song time, right? And which shows a different kind of quality. And if you look at the character, the style of writing also changed, right? Also changed. Right? So the ink, if you compare, they're all different. Right? They're all different. Okay, so this is the colophon of at the end of the one scriptures I examined, right? The Great Prajna Paramita Sutra, right? Volume number 193. And then you have this donor, right? The officials who presided over this, and this is the end of the Song Dynasty canon. Sometimes canon. Later we will see the more closely to the format of the canon.
So that was in the House of Congress in Washington?
Yeah, Library of Congress.
But that's the original one?
That's the original one, you're right.
So that's the only copy?
No,
There are many other copies?
there are copies in other places, but Song Dynasty manuscripts or prints are actually very rare, very rare. In the entire library, probably they have only 3 copies of different sutras.
Why is it in Washington?
Yeah, in Washington, you're right. So that's actually in the United States.
It was donated?
Somebody looked it from China.
But why don't they donate, or somebody loot it and sell it to
No,
someone?
there's a book market, by the way, right? So books, rare books, worth lots of money. They're expensive. If you have in your possession one copy, you can sell them in the market. And Library of Congress, they have been working on this, collect all different kinds of things. Right now the price is up, but in the turn of century, last century, when there's just a program, they purchase book from China, Japan. So Library of Congress is not the richest collection of the Chinese books. Harvard Yanjing Library, right, is one of the major collection of lots of Chinese books. So I have been there. They have the Buddhist canon, copies of Buddhist canon, but unfortunately, maybe 10 years ago, I graduated from 2002. I think after that, there was a major case, FBI involved because book got stolen. Book got stolen. A lot of the rare books have been stolen, and the FBI never been able to solve the case. And then I went to do research. I found the book, Buddhist canons I want to examine, they're all gone. Actually, they have been stolen, among the books which have been stolen. So I've been only able to examine some of them from the later time. The Song Dynasty prints actually are very rare from the canon and valuable. So this is a very valuable piece of work, right, from about 13th century. So we're talking about 700-800 years ago. Right? So I examined this piece of work.
Okay, but so these are actually being treated as a antique, right? They're not
Yeah.
really being treated as a Buddhist collection. They're
Well,
just being treated.
Right now it belongs to a library, right? So what library's function is to preserve these copies for research. So it's out of the religious community right now. This is something that we're pretty sure. And it's not complete. We have only one copy, but the reason why we can identify it's coming from Buddhist canon is because we have this 1,000 character essay. So we can identify, so this is actually exactly the call number system I mentioned. It got printed here, and also this name is a carver's name, and we have historical record to identify this is a master's name, right? Which Tripitaka, right? And we can identify him according to historical record as the person who administered this entire project. So it all matches with historical record, and we can say this is actually a copy, even we have only one copy, right? This is part of an entire canon, although we don't have that complete canon with us from Song Dynasty, right? So this is a way somehow we can, if we know the knowledge of the technical aspect, then we can identify which time era, right, it came to us, and who made this. So it's a rich information contained in this just one piece of book.
Is it Chongning?
What?
Chongning Canon? Is it
Chongning, yes,
Yeah.
Chongning, yeah.
I saw that at the Sanxi Museum.
Okay,
They show probably 4 volumes.
4 volumes. So it's very rare, right? It's very rare right now to find those. Okay, so let's move to another topic, right? This is about how to deal with the Canon when Canon was produced. So we have a storage, right? You need to put a Canon in some places. Last lecture, number 4, I mentioned I pay attention to this revolving structure, right? Wheel storage, revolving storage cabinet invented by Fuxi, right? We already know that. And another major way of storage is the wall storage, right? You build a cabinet along the wall, right? So here I give you some examples. Here is an example of the wall storage. Right? You just build a cabinet, put the Canon one case, right? This is a case by case, onto the shelf, right? And you have doors to close. But however, if you want to check out, you've got to climb up and find the case you want. Of course, you need to know the case number. In this case, is a character from Southern Character Essay, and find the book you want. But however, more interesting is this kind of a revolving bookcase. A revolving bookcase. I already said much about this last time. But here I just show you a picture. So this is an elaborate structure with a cabinet at the center. Then you can see books being piled up. This is a canon. This is one set of the entire Buddhist canon. But however, you don't see at the bottom is that their handles stick out. So for those who vowed to read the entire canon, you actually don't take out the book to read, but you push the handle. So then this structure can revolve by itself, right? So according to Buddhist tradition, this is called turning the canon, turning the scripture, which means to read. And here, literally, it means to turn. So it make a one turn equals to reading the entire canon, right? So this is more religious than simply reading the book. By finding a reference, write a term paper is not like that. But however, it's devotional. Right? And this summer, I have the opportunity to go to Japan. And I found lots of structures which bears the name of Sutra Storage House. Then you have Buddhist canon used to be there. I'm pretty sure right now it's empty, but you have a monastic structure which is dedicated to preserving the canon, right? Preserving the canon. Right? Then, right, so I want to focus on the format of a typical woodblock print. Right? In this slide, you see here, so later I have English translation here, right? But however, this is a typical block printed format. A page, if you open a book, they have elements like this. Right? So we can go through one by one. Right? Then you know how to, not to read, but however at least to identify some features of a printed Chinese book. Right? For example, you find the A here, right? Number A. The Chinese says 纸面, right? So I translate as a paper surface. Right? So all this surface here is actually a object, a 纸面, right? A surface of paper. B, then you'll find where's the B here? Here, right? It's a 版面, right? So then this means the block surface, right? So this printed area, when you see there's a black mark here, all the column actually comes from the block. So we have the paper here, but this area here is actually the block area, where you have content printed on it. And the 3C here, right, is the middle part. You see here, they have been evenly divided. At the center is a center area, a column here, from the top to the bottom. This has been called banxin or banko, right? I translate as the block center. Right? It is the block center. So this is an area actually the folding worker is going to fold the text, right? So then form a half page, and this side will come together and bind it. So when you turn the page, this center area is going to face you, right? Going to face you. Right? But however, this is a paper you kind of unfold it, right? Unfold it, then the center area is exposed like this. Right? So then there have even more further terminology for other features, right? And the D is this area, right? You see here, it has been further divided here, and here, this center area is called the middle blank, right? The blank area, right? Usually you can find titles of book being printed here, right? Being printed here, this blank area, right? And E, right? So then you see here this black, this region on top of this middle blank is called elephant trunk, right? It's more like elephant trunk here, but this particular one is a black mouse, elephant trunk, right? Black mouse, right? And number 2 is at the end of this, right? So this area, right? Also elephant trunk, but nothing there, nothing there. So this area is a black mouse, right? It's called black mouse, right? So this is E, area E, and the F is the most interesting. You see here, this is a triangle shape here, both on the top and the bottom. These are called the fishtail, a fishtail, which resembles a fishtail. And here very often you see in lots of books you could have both upper and the lower fishtail. In that case you call it double fishtail. But in other cases you probably see only one fishtail. In that case you call that single fishtail. Why these details are important? Because if they adopt the same format, very likely they came from the same set of blocks, right? Because all these pages were copied, they are printed from blocks. The blocks, of course, you can alter them, but usually if you adopt a format, then all the pages which printed from it should be the same, right? Should be the same. Right? So these are the details we should pay attention, right? So this is F, right? Then the G, it should be the column here, right? So one column, here is a blank page. And within the column, then you will see characters, right? So there's a, for identify the book, you need to count the number of characters in the column. So that's a very important information we need to keep in mind. Because as I said, if a Canon adopt a format, usually they stick to that format. Right? So then they keep the number of characters in a line, right, here, all the same, right, all the same. If you see there's a change of number of characters, that shows something happened, right, something happened. Right? And this is a border here, right, border here. And here, right, you have I here, which is the outer rim border. Right? I is the borderline, right, borderline. But however, if you look carefully, on this side, the borderline has double lines, right? So this is called 双栏, right? Double borderline. But on the bottom, the line is only one, right? One straight, solid, black line. So this is only single borderline, right? Single borderline. Right? So these are also the details you can use to understand a edition, right? So in the last, we have this book air, right? Usually you put some remarks or a identification of the book, right? So what the publisher, for example, right? There could be different kind of information. Not necessarily all book has this. I didn't see a real book which has this section, right? But however, it is a part of the block print format, right? So these are the some basic knowledge for us to identify some characteristics of printed book, right? Printed book. Right? So here we have some examples. Right? So this is not a typical printed book, but rather a copy of the first printed Canon, the Kaibao Canon. So some of the knowledge we just learned does not apply here, but we can identify, for example, the title has been printed here. Right? So this is Sutra title. Right? And here, as I said, it's very important to identify the southern character. Right? Where is that? It's actually here. It says Cao Zi Hao. Right? So Cao is actually the character. Right? So then we know it comes from a Buddhist canon. Right? Which one we don't know at this time. Right? And here is indicated the number of sheets of paper. Right? So this is the 35, number 35, right? Sheets of paper. And more information comes from the colophon here, right? It gives the time when this block has been carved, right? That's the Song Dynasty, Kaibao, 6th year, right? And following the imperial decree, it was carved. And then the carver's name being given as well, right? On the back, this is a stamp, right? Onto that, indicated as being printed from a monastery in Kaifeng. Right? And on this part is another stamp which indicated it's a dedication tablet or stamp which shows who exactly requests the printing of this piece of volume, right? This volume. So you can use knowledge like this to identify, to read the canon to identify the historical information it contains. I want to go, there's more of this, but I want to bypass and move to the printed edition. So these are printed, but kind of a, okay. No. Okay, here is the.
Professor?
What?
With the vast amounts of the imitation product made in China right now, how can we actually know these are authentic? They could probably copy from the authentic ones, right?
Yeah, yeah. Of course. Right now, the Canon available, of course, they are reproductions, right? Because the original copies are so rare, unless you want to pay a lot of money, and they're in private possessions or libraries, you just cannot get hold of it.
So all we care is actually the content. We don't really care whether.
No, we actually care about the authenticity, but we need to reproduce the canon as close as the original one.
That's right.
So this is why the first printed edition, we have only 12 volumes, for example, existed in the world. So there are great effort has been put to reproduce as close as possible. But however, you need to pay for that. It's very expensive to be able to get just reproduction. Even reproduction is very expensive. So let's focus on this printed book. Right? So this is from the Jiaxing Canon. So what we can see, this is a typical one page. Actually, this has been binded, actually coming from 2 sheets of paper. 2 sheets of paper. So you don't see here the central area I just mentioned, or rather is here. The central area is here because it's folded along here, so the other side you cannot see. Right? But you can imagine the kind of thing I talked about, the central area, you have a title here, so you have the title Ren Tian Yan Mu carved along this side. Right? And then on the top, this elephant trunk, then you have this side only the 篆书, which means the writing. But if you want to see the other side, actually you can see the next page. They're all always the same. They call it 支那. Right? 支那 means China. Right? Means China. So you put together is actually 支那篆书, which means the writing, Chinese writings. Right? And go down here, you have page number here. But in this case, in this copy, you don't see southern character carved here. This should be the position of left as a black area because that area has not been carved. There's got to be a character carved here, but it's embarrassing to say for the Jiaxing Canon because it becomes so large. They use up all the southern characters. Right? So then the cases have emerged, occurred to us, there's no character. Right? Some copies with no character, especially the later supplementary ones. So if they have, they should be carved here. Should be carved here. So it just leave as a blank because easily people can recarve on the block. Recarve on the block. So at end of this copy, you have this dedication stamp, as I said, right? Indicated where it was printed, right? Even give you the price, how much it worth, because this edition has become commercial edition. You pay. Anybody, if you want to pay, they will print the copy of the Canon and deliver to you. So it's a commercial enterprise. Commercial enterprise. Okay. Then I want to kind of focus on the production, production of the Canon. So there are different kinds of labor jobs involved in the production. For example, you need engravers, right, to carve the characters onto the blocks. You need printers, actually, to brush the ink onto the block and to put the paper onto it and to produce a piece of print. And you need a printing assistant, right, kind of a prepare for the final binding. Of course, you need binders and the brush makers, ink makers, all those kind of assistants, they are absolutely necessary in the process. So here I use a kind of illustration from making of the Korean Canon, right? To show you what's the process. What's the process? I have the English translation here, but I just talk from here on the illustration, and you can see from here all the way how a printed edition has been made. Right? Of course, in the beginning, you need to prepare the wood. Right? So the wood has been, kind of the logs has been cut from somewhere and transported here. Right? And further need to process. And this monk, what he's doing is to, I guess, is collated the text. Because he needs to prepare for the mother copy. There got to be a mother copy to be used. And then this worker, right, is preparing for the block, right, to further process the wood here and make that flat and ready to be carved with characters. Right? And this guy is making paper, right? So you need high quality papers. And this guy is making paper. And then you have the scribe here, usually a person with good calligraphical style, right? So he can write beautifully to transcribe the text onto a sheet of paper, So this piece of paper must conform with the size of block because they're going to be pasted onto the block, right? Onto the block. Then this carver can trace the character. This is what they did. Trace the character, then carve onto the wood block. So then you have the character being carved on this block, right? On this block, ready to be printed. Of course, the character is actually negative. It's negative, just like you take a photo in the old time. You have the negatives, then you print, then it becomes positive. So then on this side, you can see this monk is applying a piece of paper onto that. Of course, he should brush ink first onto the block and put the paper on that and use a presser, right, presser to press hardly to make the ink impressed onto the paper. Then you take out of this paper, then you have all the character clearly imprinted onto this piece of paper. So that's only one piece and piled here. And this person is actually the binder. Then you see what he's doing is to fold all the pages and use stitches, right, to bind this book just according to the format we introduced. Right? This is string binding. Right? So then you have books. Right? You have books ready. Of course, this book has to be put into a box, right, into a case. A lot of cases put together, then that's a canon. Right? It's a canon. Okay, so I want to bypass some of the slides and give you some real examples of how a canon has been made. Right? So I mentioned during the summer I had the advantage to visit Japan. So the research topic is nothing to do with the canon, but it's very fortunate I've been staying at Mount Fuji, close to Uji, which is South Kyoto. And that place actually is a place for production of Japanese Canon called Tetsuken, right? Tetsuken Canon. Right? What happened is that a Chinese monk called Yin Yuan Rongqi went to Japan in 1654, and he established a tradition in Japan called Obaku. And the Tetsuken became Ingen's Yin Yuan. The Japanese name is Ingen. He became his disciple, and Ingen acquired a copy of a Chinese Jiaxing Canon. And he gave this to Tetsuken because Tetsuken wanted to create a Japanese canon. So what he did is that basically copied the entire major main section of Jiaxing Canon is actually the Ming edition, the northern Ming edition. So that becomes the first effort in the modern period in Japan to produce an entire canon, right? Entire canon. Right? So I, of course, because I stay here, I visit this place, right? And Yano-san is the person who in charge of this. He was actually the worker doing everything, right? And he showed me the blocks, right? So we examined the blocks. Right? You see, it's all black because you apply ink onto it. Right? And he was showing me. You can see the blocks; they all been stacked together, put on the shelf. Right? And he was holding a piece of block and showing me, and he said, this is actually a block for carving the Chinese Qing Dragon edition. I never know that, but what he said is that some Japanese monks actually attempted to reproduce the Qing edition, right? But however, it's never completed, never completed. I don't know the detail about that, right? And this is the way how they storage all the blocks. And you see all these characters, these are coming from the southern character essay, right? So you have characters here, but nobody can memorize that. In addition to that, we can see the Japanese monks put the numerical number here, right? Just for us easy to identify. Nobody can remember all these characters, which position they are in the southern character system. So they have been put there. This is too dark, right? But simply the hall, which it's double floor, right? The 2 floors holding all the blocks. And the Yano-san, right? This is Yano-san here. Typically, his work is to sit there between the stacks and making copies from blocks. So of course, they sell this piece of paper to believers or visitors. It's on yellow paper, but what he's doing here is to apply ink. He first applies inks onto this block, and notice here there's a small round thing. This is the pressure. He actually, because he has been doing this for a long time, he actually studied the ways of using different kind of tools. So he pointed to me the pressure in the Korean tradition, Tibetan tradition, Chinese tradition. They are all different. They're all different. And he claimed that his way is the most authentic, right? Because he used natural material. Right? So this is coming from a piece of wood, I think, and covered with a leaf, a dried leaf or some plant. I don't know. I don't know. So then this one you can see is continue doing that. This is a more close look. The blocks putting here, right? He's applying the ink. You have to do this kind of evenly because you want the print on the paper to be clear enough. And this is the final product. Right? So exactly as I said, this is basically a reproduction of the Chinese version. So my speculation is that what they did is that they tear off the Chinese pages from the Chinese canon and apply to the wood and carve, trace all the characters. So the layout resembles the Chinese canon. Right? And you have the central area with title, page number, and southern character number here. Right? On the top, you have, in this case, Jing Sutra, right? Indicated which session it comes from. Then I have some study questions for those students who want to study it further. Right? All these questions cover my lecture topics. So at this point, I want to stop here, right, and open the floor for discussion.